What else can go wrong? Being Ubisoft's biggest franchise, the Assassin's Creed series is beloved by many, with Assassin's Creed 2 often being cited as the best one in the series. But not often will you ever find anybody talking about the first Assassin's Creed game. Beginning life as a Prince of Persia spin-off titled Prince of Persia Assassin, the game's initial concepts involved you playing as an assassin protecting the prince with magical powers in Jerusalem. With the developers focusing so much attention on the assassin character rather than the prince himself, Ubisoft decided to have the game spun off into a new IP, with the inner workings of the Assassin's Creed franchise beginning to take shape. Throughout 2006, bits and pieces of the plot and characters were revealed, such as the assassin being a medieval hitman with a mysterious past, and a plot centered around a modern-day scientific research experiment involving genetic memory and a Matrixy-style thriller plot. Before long, the developers had centered on the 12th century, more specifically during the Crusades around 1191, around about the point where Salah ad-Din defeated King Richard in the Battle of Arsuf. Not only limited to the time period, but many of the characters seen in Assassin's Creed were actual living people during that point in time. With some liberties taken, of course, but there is a lot of grounding in reality with Assassin's Creed. Well, as much as you can be with this game having taken place almost 1,000 years ago. Even assassins like Al-Mualim and Altair's real-life counterpart Hassan-e-Sabah, I hope to God I'm pronouncing that right, those characters had actually existed in real life, and Ubisoft had drawn inspiration for them to put them in the game. And so, on November 21st, 2007, Assassin's Creed stabbed its way into generally favourable reviews at the time. But the question is, has Assassin's Creed 2 completely overshadowed the good qualities of the first one, or was the quality of the overall game just diminished from the get-go? Let's dive into the Animus and find out in Assassin's Creed. So the plot kicks off in a laboratory with Desmond Miles awakening in a panic to find himself being held prisoner by a company known as Abstergo Industries. A corporation known for operating in a variety of business sectors who, as Desmond soon comes to find out, are using him to test out a machine on him known as the Animus. The two doctors named Warren Vidic and Lucy Stillman explain to Desmond that within the genetic memories of bartending and martini mixing lay some very important genetic information that Abstergo seek to obtain. We come to learn that Desmond is affiliated with a group known as the Assassins, despite his claims to the contrary. Although Warren does claim that as soon as he and Lucy get what they want they'll let Desmond go, he also explains that he could just as easily leave Desmond in a comatose state, but having him conscious saves time on Abstergo's part. But no matter what Desmond chooses, Warren ultimately tells Desmond that he really only has no choice but to cooperate with Abstergo, as it would take the more time-consuming option which would eventually lead him to die. So basically Desmond's stuck between we are and fucked. Desmond lies down on the Animus, and the two doctors begin to explain the basics of what the Animus does, and that it's basically a machine that not only reads a person's own memories, but the genetic memories of their ancestors. What Lucy and Warren are trying to do is access a specific memory in Desmond's ancestor, but find that they can't lock onto it because Desmond rejected being let straight into the memory, so as such they must work their way up to it from a set point in his ancestor's timeline. So upon entering the Animus, we kick off with Desmond's ancestor Altair ibn La-Ahad, breaking the first tenet of the Assassin's Creed, apparently. Anyway, Altair, alongside his assassin's brothers, Malik and Kadar, have been sent to Jerusalem to recover the Ark of the Covenant, which contains the secret treasure that's been desired by the Knights Templar during the Third Crusades in the year 1192. It's also in this scene that we see that Altair is revered as a master assassin by Kadar's praise of the man, however his older brother Malik is a little bit more cynical of Altair's methods.
Fortune favors your blade.
Not fortune, skill. Watch a while longer and you might learn something.
Indeed. He'll teach you how to disregard everything the Masters taught us.
It matters not how we complete our task, only that it's done.
But this is not the way of—
My way is better.
And as you can see here, Altair apparently has an ego that can sustain entire solar systems. While exploring the temple, Altair and the gang discover that the Templar Grand Master of the time, Robert de Sable, has come to retrieve the treasure with Altair eager to take his life. Malik, on the other hand, is appalled that Altair would go as far as to breaking all 3 tenets of the creed just so that he could soak up the glory of killing Robert de Sable, but like the egotistical jackass that Altair is, he confronts Robert despite Malik's advice. Altair leaps in for the kill only for Robert to severely outmatch him, and he spares his life only so that he may return to the assassin's compound in Masyaf to inform their leader that the power of the Templar's treasure will soon be in their possession. With Altair thrown from the room, Malik and Kadar are essentially fucked as they lock in combat with a bunch of Templars, and they are seemingly outmanned while Altair escapes to return to Masyaf. Although Altair never speaks of what happened in Solomon's temple to anyone, it's clear to most people that Altair, as most kids would call him, is a teacher's pet for the assassin's leader, Al-Mualim.
Best hurry. No doubt you're eager to put your tongue to his boot.
Oh, that Abbas character. I have a feeling that he's going to become vaguely important in Assassin's Creed Revelations. And completely suck as a character. Anyway, Altair returns to see Al-Mualim, or Rashid ad-Din Sinan, for those of you who are of a more historical background, and he reveals that his mission was a failure, which he doesn't really take too well.
I send you, my best man, to complete a mission more important than any that has come before. And you return to me with nothing but apologies and excuses.
Al-Mualim chews up Altair until it's revealed that Malik manages to survive Robert's attack at the cost of his arm and his brother's life, but in doing so, he did manage to recover the Templar treasure. Suddenly, the assassins are informed that Robert de Sable has seized the village and seeks a battle between himself and the assassins. Robert demands that Al-Mualim return the Templar treasure to him with the threat of destroying the assassins with his Templar armada, with continued attacks to dwindle their resources. And so as a test of faith in how the assassins do not fear death but embrace it, Al-Mualim orders Altair and his assassins to, as George Cullen puts it, jump for Jesus.
Go to God!
Okay, that didn't happen, but something does snap upon reaching the ground.
Oh, my leg! Oh, my leg!
Altair sneaks around behind the Templars and uses a medieval variant of a Home Alone trap, which really does get the logs rolling, and for the assassins to seize victory against Robert de Sable by really stumping his plan to siege the village. In the aftermath of the battle, Al-Mualim lectures Altair that because he listened to what was asked of him, he was successful in driving the Templars away, and had he listened back in Solomon's temple, then none of this would have ever happened. As a result of this, Al-Mualim decides that there is only one way to deal with one who betrays the creed on such a scale. Desmond awakes from the Animus, overhearing Warren and Lucy's conversation about how Desmond is adapting to the Animus far quicker than the other subjects in accepting his ancestors' memories. However, Lucy, despite Warren's enthusiasm, opts to have Desmond pulled out for reasons which she wishes to speak about in private. Desmond locates a nearby vent where he overhears Lucy and Warren arguing over Desmond being coddled by Lucy, versus Warren apparently trying to quote-unquote kill him. From there, the conversation goes on about how Lucy should never challenge Warren's authority in front of Desmond again, as she may end up like Layla, whatever that means, with Lucy also commenting about how everyone's been on edge since the apparent accident. When Warren informs Desmond that he's done to the day, he goes off to speak with Lucy as Desmond expounds upon his backstory, in that he was initially going to be trained as an assassin, but then he ran away from the compound known as the farm when he was 16 years old. Back then, Desmond just thought that his parents were a bunch of crazy hippies and wanted more out of life for himself, despite the fact that he was given explicit orders never to leave the assassin's compound. Before Desmond decides to go to sleep, Lucy lets slip a little ambiguous comment.
This is a drug company. What does Abstergo have to do with the DMV?
Desmond, these guys are everywhere. I'm sorry, I really can't talk about it.
So it seems that Abstergo is a lot more than a corporate entity and has something far deeper going on beneath the surface than Desmond's aware of. Ordinarily, most people I've known who ever play the game usually just skip the modern day portions of Assassin's Creed and find that they don't really add much to the game, but in their defense, I will say this. If you really take the time to dig deep into what's going on, there is some really dark shit going on at Abstergo Industries. Anyway, the following morning, Desmond awakens to find Warren overlooking him as he proceeds to lecture Desmond upon the morals of the assassins compared to Warren's own view on their methods. He speaks of how the assassins never went far enough in their methods of seeking peace in all things, and rather should have focused on a grander scale, which as he puts it,
there's no true change to be had without comprehensive, systemic intervention.
Chemo for the masses.
Education, re-education, to be more precise.
Diving into the Animus once more, Altair awakens to find himself alive, to which Al-Mualim explains that he was spared from death so that he may reclaim his lost honor and rank as an assassin, forcing Altair to begin again as a novice. Al-Mualim continues in saying that in order for Altair to redeem himself, he must seek out his target, who was somebody who assisted Robert de Sable and allowed him access into the gates of Masyaf. Altair, though begrudgingly accepting his current role, really doesn't like Al-Mualim's approach in his redemption.
The Assassin have many tools at their disposal.
Yes, yes.
Upon tracing down his target to a preacher in Masyaf, Altair then interrogates him, and let's just say, he pulls no punches.
Enough! I yield! I yield!
Altair takes the traitor to Al-Mualim, where he offers the traitor a chance to repent for his crimes against the assassins, but the traitor says that he'd gladly die for the Templar cause, which in response Al-Mualim's wisdom really cuts deep into how he views the heresy of the teachings born of the Templars. Unfortunately for Altair, however, he finds out that his adventure is just beginning, as Al-Mualim explains that there are 9 Templars that must be eliminated, as their power and influence could severely damage the Holy Land and would only fuel the Crusades to continue. With this, Al-Mualim offers Altair's redemption for the 9 lives of the people on the list, including Robert de Sable. With Altair accepting his mission, he rides for Damas to assassinate his first target.
Giddy up, horsey! Go forth, my trusty steed, to lands unknown to me, but known to Altair.
Altair's first target is the merchant king Tamir. A black market dealer who, as Altair comes to learn from pickpocketing and eavesdropping, has been involved in the mass production of weapons and armor. Many might just assume that they're meant for Saladin in his war against the Crusaders, but considering the fact that Tamir's on the same list as Robert de Sable, I think there's more to this than we're being told. On the day of the assassination, Altair bides his time while Tamir walks him on the souk, berating one of his subordinates for being slow on weapon and armor production, claiming that Tamir is overworking them too hard, which, as you can imagine, Tamir doesn't quite take so well. Upon Tamir's assassination, the player is treated to a Metal Gear Solid-style death epilogue, as I call it, and he speaks of how his role has been played and that Altair will come to learn of his brothers in time. Meanwhile, Desmond awakes in the real world as Warren informs him that he's done for the day, and begrudgingly so after Lucy told him to let Desmond rest. Lucy goes on to tell Desmond about the reason why Warren is so determined to access one of Desmond's core memories regarding Altair is because of a deadline placed on him by Abstergo, who seeks something that Lucy cannot tell Desmond about. She tells Desmond that the reason why she can't speak of Desmond's capture is because it's safer that way, not only for him, but for the both of them. And people say these are the boring segments of the game. Upon going to sleep, one thing that the player will come to note is the flashes of symbols and typographic characters, which is something that will come into play later. The next morning, Desmond asks what Warren seeks to accomplish with the Animus and Altair's life story, to which he responds with how society has remained just as barbaric and violent as it was during the Crusades, and what Warren wants to achieve is order to the chaos which has consumed the world. He continues in explaining that he wishes to give humanity purpose and direction, in the hopes that it would finally bring an end to all of the conflict, once again bringing up the purpose of the assassins with their desire for peace in all things. Back inside the Animus, Altair returns to Masyaf, informing Al-Mualim of his success. Al-Mualim then sends Altair to his next 2 targets on the list, with one in Acre and the other in Jerusalem. In Acre, Altair comes to learn that his target is Gagne de Nablus of the Knights Hospitalia, who, as Altair later comes to learn, has been experimenting on people taken from Damas and Jerusalem. On the day of the assassination, Altair locates the good doctor, and he bears witness to one of the results of his medical prowess.
Cast out this fear, else I cannot help you.
Help me? Like you helped the others? You took their souls! I saw, but not mine. No, you'll not have mine.
In response to this, Gagne wishes his patient the best of luck and recovery by telling him to break a leg. Upon assassinating Gagne before his death, he explains to Altair that he believed what he was doing was a kindness, that by liberating the sick and the insane from what little they had initially before being tended by him, he would have hoped they would have given them purpose again, as he points out by stating that many of the guards loyal to him were once just like the patients he had once experimented on. One last thing he mentions that he wished he could have had something called the Peace of Eden, which would have aided greatly in the healing process of their minds. And evidence of Gagne's work can actually be heard in-game, with conversations about how patients cannot remember themselves while talking to Gagne. When returning to Masyaf, Altair confers with Al-Mualim about what Gagne had spoken to him about, and Altair is still very uneasy on how Gagne truly believed that his work was for the best of those he had attempted to cure. but more to the point, there was more than a few of them that appeared grateful for what Gagne had done to them despite the pain and torment they had initially endured. Al-Mualim then speaks about the lengths in which leaders are willing to go to in order to ensure loyalty among their people. Words, money, base things, bribes, threats, and other such things. And it's this kind of thing which really began to make me appreciate the first Assassin's Creed story, because unlike later entries, it really goes into the philosophy of human nature and how many of our idiosyncrasies could have been easily taken advantage of, even as far as back then, and scarily enough, even today. With Altair heading for Jerusalem on a horse that I now dub Bessie, he travels across the kingdom to face his new target who goes by the name of Talal. One other thing to note is that we actually get to see Malik again, who after having his arm amputated, is being set as the head of the Assassin's Bureau in Jerusalem, and as is painfully obvious with Kadar's death and the loss of his arm, he's none too pleased to see Altair again.
Safety and peace, Malik.
Your presence here deprives me of both.
While first-time players might find Malik's sarcastic quips a little bit harsh on the player's part, when you really think back to Altair's actions and how badly it affected Malik, I actually started chuckling at a lot of what Malik had to say about Altair.
Rest, prepare, cry in the corner. Do whatever it is you do before a mission.
On the day of the assassination, Altair tracks down Talal, after learning that Talal is a renowned slaver. Oh yeah, and Skully's fun fact of the week here. Talal is actually an Arabic name meaning admirable and nice. Need to remind you that this man is a slaver. Anyway, Altair confronts Talal, who claims that he is saving people who he's holding captive, and as he puts it, preparing them for the journey that lies ahead. When Talal is assassinated, he once again speaks of his brothers who are as one, like the assassins, alongside how he believed that God has abandoned them, and that the kindness he has done to the slaves was a means of salvation that Altair has taken away from them. Upon returning to the Assassin's Bureau, Malik appears to be in high spirits.
Altair! Wonderful to see you return to us! And how fared the mission?
The deed is done. Talal is dead.
Oh, I know. In fact, the entire city knows!
Meanwhile, back in the present, Desmond is awakened with Warren once again furious that his progress is impeded by the Animus overheating, which means that Desmond is relieved for the night. When Desmond asks why Lucy lets Warren berate her like that, she lets slip that Warren saved her life. Lucy then goes on to implicitly state that even though she's an employee of Abstergo, she's no more free than Desmond himself. She reveals that when she was finishing her PhD in the field of science, she had failed to find work given that most of her employers had dubbed her doctorate as pseudoscience. That is until she received a letter from Warren Vidic, who took an active interest in her work and theories. She soon met with Warren and found employment with Abstergo working on the Animus project. However, she starts thinking about whether or not Abstergo was in some way responsible to these events, which would eventually lead her to becoming into their employ, as they do have the resolve and the resources to do such a thing. While working on the Animus project, she would be a guest of the company for 6 months, and by the time it was done, she would be free to go. However, one night 3 men came and attacked her, people that she worked with, who sought to have their way with her until Warren came in shouting at them to leave her alone, effectively keeping Lucy under his protection. Lucy then concludes that for all of Warren's faults, no matter how many times Warren shouts at her, being alive is preferable to the fate that awaited her from that night. This is so retcon for the later games. Anyway, Desmond returns to his room to find that it's been tampered with and ends up finding a security pen in his wardrobe, which he then uses to escape his room. With his newfound freedom, Desmond checks Lucy's computer and finds that the employees of Abstergo have been rather quiet on the subject of Layla, whose death was supposedly considered a suicide, but then again, when you really think about the previous events, that information seems rather subject. The next morning, Warren arrives chipper as fuck.
Rise and shine. We've got quite a day ahead of us.
And then explains that the Animus can now run for far longer periods of time, and explains how Abstergo is changing the world in all fields, whether technological, philosophical, or in medical fields. What Warren goes as far to imply is that Abstergo has found remnants of those who came before. Ooh. And that because of these discoveries, it has allowed Abstergo to go above and beyond what should be feasibly possible at this time in terms of human development. Taking what he learned from Altair, Desmond picks Warren's pocket and lifts his security pen for later use, which he plans to use to dig deeper into Abstergo's conspiracy. Meanwhile, back in Masyaf, Al-Mualim is informed of Altair's success in killing Gagne and Talal, but there is still much more that needs to be done. With tensions between King Richard and Salah ad-Din on the rise, the seeds of the historical Battle of Arsuf are becoming sown, with Altair's new targets being the men set to govern the cities in the two's absence. William of Montferrat and Acre, Abul Nakud of Damas, and Majduddin of Jerusalem are Altair's targets. With his mission in mind, Altair commandeers Bessie and rides for each city once more with the blood of his targets as his only goal. Though each of these men are in fact driven by similar goals, there are key differences between them. Abul Nakud was driven to expose the hypocrisy of the rich and privileged, which resulted in a massacre of his palatial estate before Altair put an end to his life. In his dying moments, it's revealed that Abul Nakud wasn't putting finances towards Salah ad-Din's troops, but rather to a cause that he pledged himself to, and that Altair would soon come to know of who they truly were in time. Although this wasn't before finding a G1 Optimus Prime who had transformed into a window back in the 12th century, which is really weird. But the strangest thing is that when Altair confides in Al-Mualim about everything he's learned so far about the 9 targets Altair has been sent to kill, it's here where Al-Mualim delivers mixed signals.
There is a difference, Altair, between what we are told to be true and what we see to be true. Most men do not bother to make the distinction. It is simpler that way. But as an assassin, it is your nature to notice, to question.
Then what is it that connects these men?
Ah, but as an assassin, it is also your duty to still these thoughts and trust in your master. For there can be no true peace without order, and order requires authority.
I don't know, it seems to me that Al-Mualim is telling Altair that he has to look underneath the underneath to perceive things deeper than at face value, but at the same time he's also telling him to obey his master and the instructions he's been given. Sounds kinda contradictory to the phrase, nothing is true, but everything is permitted. As Altair and his trusty steed Bessie ride for Acre, William of Montferrat, though in real life having been murdered by his son Conrad, in Assassin's Creed, William sought to instead claim Acre for himself, as he attempted to dissuade loyalty to King Richard. Much like Garnier, William's plan was to have the people of Acre prepared for the New World, which he sought to achieve by instilling loyalty and discipline, as well as depriving people of basic humanitarian resources such as food and the like. With all these cryptic riddles on Altair's mind, he demands that Al-Mualim tell him of the ties that bind the 9 together, which is revealed that all of these men Altair have been sent to kill have pledged allegiance to the Knights Templar. Al-Mualim explains that the Templars do not seek control of the Holy Land under King Richard or Salah ad-Din, but rather for themselves. Now armed with knowledge so that he might better understand his prey, Altair and Bessie ride for Jerusalem where he confronts Malik once more. Malik explains that Majd-ud-Din holds the city with fear of him as he has scheduled public executions of those who have committed petty crimes, and adding to that how Majd-ud-Din also has one of the assassins captured and sentenced to be executed. Upon his death, Majd-ud-Din reveals that he, like William of Montferrat, sought power and killed not only because he thought it was just, but rather because he could. And it's also in this scene that we actually see a little bit of Altair growing up.
Once perhaps. But then I learned what becomes of those who lift themselves above others.
And what is that?
Here, let me show you.
And that's part of the reason why I like Altair as a character so much, because the game really does do a great job in highlighting his development based upon the events around him shaping his worldview, rather than somebody else influencing him to do so. Upon returning to the Bureau, Malik, though still not exactly on the best of terms with Altair, is this time much less mean-spirited with his criticisms and tells him that he should reflect on his work and how an assassin should act. Meanwhile, back in the present, Desmond once again awakes from the Animus, with Warren getting a phone call informing him that the assassins are attempting to rescue Desmond. When Warren leaves to go deal with his superiors, Lucy explains that the battles between the Templars and the Assassins back in the Crusades hadn't ended right then and there, but rather they had both survived, and Abstergo is the current face of the Knights Templar. So yeah, Vidic, Lucy, and the entirety of Abstergo are in fact Templars. Lucy goes on to say that the information regarding the Templars and their influence upon the modern world was altered in a way so that it couldn't be traced back to them, which really makes sense when you consider what Warren Vidic was saying earlier. But another really interesting aspect that Lucy brings up is how, even despite their methods of what Abstergo hopes to achieve, it's ultimately for the betterment of mankind, but that comes at the cost of their means in which to achieve it. Unfortunately, Desmond and Lucy's conversation is cut short, to which Desmond uses this time to do a little bit more snooping into Abstergo's conspiracy. By hacking into Warren's computer using the access code Desmond swiped earlier, he finds 2 deleted emails, with a particular one of note being titled, I know. The first message speaks about how somebody unknown had seen a metal ball which opened up and had people turn insane and tear each other apart, with the Abstergo name and logo being associated with that event, and the unknown sender plotting to expose Abstergo for what really happened. From what we can assume, this here is most likely the accident that Warren and Lucy alluded to earlier. So let's take a breather and refresh everything that we've learned so far. We have a modern day company that stretches as far back to the 12th century. We have a conspiracy in which a metal ball was responsible for making people turn crazy. And to top it all off, Desmond Miles holds the key to all of this in Altair's memories, which the assassins are also desperate to keep away from Abstergo's hands. Everybody got that? And the people say that the Abstergo and future segments are just so boring. Anyway, the next morning, Warren is kind of abrasive.
Missed you this morning, Doc.
Get in the Animus.
Oh, what, am I not good enough for you, Doc? Is that it? Am I not good enough for you anymore? After all those mornings of waking me up when I go. Is that what I am to you? I thought we had something here. Something special. Leave it to you, Templar bastard, ruining a little thing I believe in called love. Meanwhile, back in the Animus, Altair comes to Al-Mualim seeking knowledge upon what he has learned from the last 3 targets and seeks to know why they chose to betray their leaders. Al-Mualim tells Altair that the Templars desire control of the Holy Land, but the Assassin Master claiming that they would not succeed in their plans because of the Templar treasure being in Al-Mualim's possession, which as we can see here is in the shape of a small metal ball and... oh. Al-Mualim shows Altair the Templar treasure, which he calls the Piece of Eden, which he explains to be temptation incarnate, where Al-Mualim has Altair look at it as if to perceive some kind of grand majesty, but all Altair sees it as just a piece of steel. Al-Mualim continues to say that most of, if not all biblical stories such as the parting of the Red Sea, Adam and Eve being cast out of the Garden of Eden, and even the explanation for Jesus' powers are all the result of the Piece of Eden, and that the power that it has to win the hearts and minds of any who look upon the controller of this treasure. It's here that Altair makes the connection between the effects of Garnier's treatment back in Acre was said to replicate the effects of the Piece of Eden, and as Al-Mualim explains, it was in preparation for those who sought to wield its power. And it's here where all the pieces begin to fall into place. Talar supplied Garnier with the troops, Tamir supplied them with weapons and armor, William, Majduddin and Abu Nakud were said to lead the cities with the people united and disciplined into the ideal citizens for the Templars' rule. The Templars were weaving their schemes into the background, all in the name of a perfect world, while Salah ad-Din and King Richard were off fighting each other, distracted from the Templars' plans. With Altair once again focused in his goal of stopping the Templars, his next 2 targets are Sabrand in Acre and Jubair in Damas, and Altair rides to both of these cities on his trusty steed Bessie, now more determined than ever. When in the process of assassinating Jubair, while stalking his target, Altair comes to find out that Jubair has a serious hatred of books.
No, these bits of paper are covered in lies. They poison your minds, and so long as they exist, you cannot hope to see the world the way it truly is.
Yeah, another one of Scully's fun facts of the week. Back in ye olden times of 1973, actually way before then, books and printed media weren't exactly looked upon as the bastions of knowledge that they are today. And to Jubair's credit, the game does try and bring up the argument about how context is so easily created and that the information can alter and colour the perception of those who obtain such knowledge, but that's a tangent I think I'll save for whenever I review Metal Gear Solid 2. Anyway, it's while Jubair is burning books that he and his colleague get into a heated argument, where Jubair decides to fire his subordinates by burning bridges, if you'll pardon the metaphor.
Then join them!
With Jubair dead, Altair and Bessie ride for Acre, where he does battle against Sibrand, who as Altair later comes to learn, is a little bit more than unhinged.
Perhaps they do not know you because you are not a man of God, but an assassin!
Sibrand, and I'm not sure if this is historically accurate to his character or not, but in this game, he's portrayed as a paranoid, if not psychotic leader of the Knights Teutonic, who looks as if he's about to kill everybody around him if even the slightest thing is out of his control. And trust me, there is a very good reason for that. What Sibrand set out to do was deny King Richard any more troops by blocking out the docks of Acre, not from Salah ad-Din, but rather from him getting any more troops back from England. Upon his death, Sibrand reveals that he was afraid of being killed by the assassins because he didn't believe in God because of what the Templars had shown him, and that having realized that this life was all he had, he sought to free the Holy Land from the religious influence. And for those of you who are not in the know, way back in the 12th century, somebody who was in a world surrounded by everybody who was of religious faith, coming to the realization that there is no God or heaven awaiting for them when they die, that's a pretty fucking terrifying thought. Meanwhile, back in the present, Desmond is awoken and overhears a conversation between Warren Vidic and his superior about how they're coming close to locating a specific memory in Altair's life and that when they're done, Desmond will be taken care of. Desmond questions Lucy as to why the Animus ejected him prematurely, to which Lucy responds with basically this.
I'm pretty sure it just ejected me
I'm
when
pretty sure you should shut up.
It's here where Lucy states that both she and Desmond have to stop Abstergo from accessing that last memory before it's too late, stating that Abstergo planned like the Templars, is to alter humanity on a large scale into a perfect society in the Templar image, just like what Warren was speaking to Desmond about days prior. With this, Lucy goes on to state that the key to Abstergo's victory lies in the piece of Eden that Al-Mualim had in his possession. Desmond then interjects stating that from the looks of things, why didn't Abstergo just go and pick up the piece of Eden at Masyaf, to which Lucy responds how it was destroyed in the accident that Desmond had read about from the unknown sender. What makes things worse is that there isn't just that specific piece of Eden, but there are also far more that Abstergo has yet to possess. When going back out to do some more snooping into Abstergo's business, Desmond learns that Lucy has been exchanging with emails with somebody who goes unidentified, who are also tied with the destruction of Abstergo's satellite, and as well as taking an apparent interest in Desmond, but wishes for him to remain unaware of their presence. The most interesting thing is that Lucy's message stating, "Can you send rescue?" gets a reply to which for the first time viewer appears as junk mail, but actually translates out to, "We will be there soon." The next morning, Warren comes back for some morning chit-chat and basically tells Desmond about the things that he's seen in the Animus and all the inconsistencies with recorded history, and about the misinformation and context lost to the entropy of time. Back inside the Animus, Altair and Al-Mualim confer as all that stands in the assassin's way is Robert de Sable, who was attending the funeral of Majduddin in Jerusalem. But before Altair and Bessie ride for Jerusalem, Al-Mualim goes on about how both the Assassins and Templars are alike in many ways, which is through the ultimate goal of themselves being peace, to which Al-Mualim feels it is something to be learned in order to be embraced, whereas Robert would prefer to force it upon others. However, as Altair arrives in Jerusalem, it appears that things between Altair and Malik have changed, as Altair accepts his actions and how badly he screwed up Malik's life by costing his arm and his brother's life.
All this time, I never told you I was sorry. Too damn proud. You lost your arm because of me. Lost Qadar. You had every right to be angry.
I do not accept your apology.
I understand.
No, you don't. I do not accept your apology because you are not the same man who went with me into Solomon's temple. And so you have nothing to apologize for.
But to be serious for a second, this is probably one of my favourite scenes in the game because it really does highlight how far Altair has come throughout the game from the arrogant prick he was in the beginning to walking the path of a much wiser man. And even Malik himself admits that there was a lot of spite that he had for Altair's talents, and seeing these two make peace with each other, it's a pretty touching moment to say the least. Anyway, on the day of Robert de Sable's assassination, Altair masquerades within the crowd of Majduddin's funeral, where Robert looks a lot shorter than I remembered, and slightly more feminine looking. Unfortunately for Altair, Robert takes notice of the assassin's presence, and before long chaos ensues where Altair performs a fatal blow on Robert, and he unmasks him to reveal that Robert is a woman? As it turns out, the woman, later known as Maria, was acting as Robert's phantom while he was off in Arsuf attempting to convince King Richard and Salah ad-Din to join forces with the Templars so that they would be able to decimate the assassins, using Altair's victims as proof that the assassins were dangerous to both of their forces. With Altair deciding that he would not give Robert another reason to turn the famous leaders against his brothers, Altair lets Maria go, stating that she is not her target and allows her to go free. Man, would this be an awkward story to tell the kids. Knowing that it would be too late if he consulted Al-Mualim back in Masyaf, Altair and Bessie ride for Arsuf, where Malik returns to Solomon's temple in search of answers that Altair believes Al-Mualim has hidden from them. Arriving in time to Arsuf midway during the battle, Altair encounters King Richard and Robert de Sable, in which Altair stands in defense of the Brotherhood and accuses Robert of being a traitor by explaining the acts of betrayal done by William of Montferrat, Garnier de Demblus, and Sibrand being the reasons behind why Altair had killed them. Robert, attempting to save face, dismisses Altair's arguments, with King Richard finding himself at an impasse, which leads to one of my favourite lines in the entire game.
It is a difficult decision, one I cannot make alone. I must leave it in the hands of one wiser than I.
Thank you.
No, Robert, not you.
Then who?
The Lord.
Oh, what a moron! Am I right?
King Richard's decision comes from the victory of a battle between Altair and Robert de Sable. As Altair ends Robert's life, things aren't quite as victorious as Altair would imagine. Robert's last words speak about how Altair was just a mere puppet used by another one of Robert's brothers, the 10th Templar conspirator who sought the deaths of all who knew about the Piece of Eden.
It is your master, Al-Mualim.
Robert concludes by saying that even though he was out of the picture, Altair would be Al-Mualim's next target given the knowledge he would have obtained from a dying Robert. Which is really weird considering that in real life, Robert de Sable actually survived the Battle of Arsuf and died as an old man. Before Altair leaves, King Richard asks him why he would travel so far and risk his life all for Robert's death, which Altair claims it to be justice and in the name of peace, while King Richard points out the fallacy that an assassin who strives for peace ultimately betrays that cause given the task they have to carry out for the lives of the others. But in doing so, Altair also brings up about how Salah ad-Din would like the Crusades to come to an end just as much as those of King Richard's men despite their beliefs. With Altair giving his farewells to King Richard, Desmond is immediately ejected from the Animus to a pissed off Warren Vidic informing Desmond that the assassins have come to rescue him. A communication network broadcasts a transmission of gunfire and commotion as Warren speaks about how Desmond must have contacted them in some way.
I told you I had nothing to do with this. How would I even contact them? Telepathy? Come on!
Unfortunately for Desmond, Abstergo managed to defeat the other assassins with his chances of rescue sunk, with Warren explaining that tomorrow he and Lucy will access the final memory in Altair's past, and Abstergo's chances of obtaining another piece of Eden are within their hands. Lucy offers her condolences to Desmond as he comes to realize that the assassin's compound he grew up on called the Farm was completely destroyed, and he begins to break down after facing the totality of his circumstances, but not before Lucy has this to say.
Just try and have a little faith.
I don't think there's really much more that needs to be said here. Except for massive retcons that I don't like to talk about in later games, but we'll get to them never, hopefully. When sneaking out to snoop out more of Abstergo's plans, Desmond finds Warren's superior, Alan Rickon, explain that they need to accelerate their plans, and he's about ready to pull the plug on Desmond's time in the Animus if he doesn't gain access to that memory. On the final day, Desmond awakens to a chipper as fuck Warren Vidic who's over the moon at the prospect that he can finally get this project over with, stating that it's going to be a historical day now that Abstergo can finally change the world as their Templar predecessors had always wanted. Upon entering the Animus for the final time, Altair returns to Masyaf stating that the people inside have become brainwashed by Al-Mualim's use of the Piece of Eden, and so too have his assassin brothers. And the build-up to actually travelling to Al-Mualim is probably one of my favourite parts in the entire game. The music, the droning chants of the citizens worshipping Al-Mualim, it all makes for a very unsettling atmosphere and really sets the morbidly psychological tone of this game. When Altair is ambushed by assassins, Malik and his own group arrive to his aid, uncorrupted by Al-Mualim's Templar treasure, with Altair asking Malik to hold off the other assassins while he faces off against Al-Mualim alone. Oh, and one of my favourite lines in 3, 2, 1...
Safety and peace, my friend.
Your presence here will deliver us both.
When finally confronting Al-Mualim, he reveals his true colours as Altair bears witness to the temptation incarnate as Al-Mualim becomes drunk on his own power. What comes of this is how every major assassination target you've killed in the game quite literally comes back to life and are all pitted against you in a boss fight. Thankfully, however, it turns out that they were all just illusions projected by the Piece of Eden, otherwise this would have been fucking terrifying. Although I'm not gonna lie, I actually was pretty freaked out knowing that all the bosses were gunning for my death. Al-Mualim and Altair both verbally and physically fight, with their beliefs clashing as Al-Mualim believes, as the Templars do, that so long as free will exists, there can be no true peace. Altair asks why Al-Mualim didn't alter his mind in the same way that he did to the people of Masyaf, where it's explained that he actually did try when he first showed the Piece of Eden to Altair in his study. But in doing that, he would have deprived himself of Altair's talents, which would have gone to waste if he was just a mindless slave. And it's from there that Al-Mualim explains that that's all the Piece of Eden has ever done. Create illusions. Altair then argues about the moral ethics of forcing those to follow Al-Mualim's way against their will, to which the assassin master counters with how it's no different from what the Saracens or the Crusaders do in their wars over God. And you know, it's for philosophical conflicts like this that make this my favourite Assassin's Creed game in the series, because there's so much depth into the ideologies of the Assassins and Templars, which really goes to show how much more of an interesting conflict at large this is. On the one hand, the Assassins believe in free will so that they may choose a better path which would ultimately lead to peace, whereas the Temple believes that those with free will can and will ultimately use that free will to incite chaos, and believe as such that the only way to achieve true peace is to be forced and for free will to be non-existent in obtaining peace through unified order. I mean, it's a lot to think about when you realise that both sides have fallacies, but at the same time both offer truths and revelations that are pretty accurate to say the least. I mean, especially considering that it would have been so easy to write the Templars as the stock bad guys that seek to take over the world just because they can. As Altair and Al-Mualim do battle for the last time, Altair comes out the victor and Al-Mualim finally breathes his last. Altair states that he believes that the Piece of Eden should be destroyed, while Al-Mualim wonders why he would destroy the one thing capable of achieving peace and, in his own way, actually mocks Altair for thinking he can destroy something which is temptation incarnate. Suddenly, the Piece of Eden hums to life as it projects a map of the Earth with key locations pinpointing other pieces of Eden across the planet. But Al-Mualim asks why Altair could not destroy it as he had claimed beforehand, to which Altair states he can't. And finally, the voice of Warren Vidic is heard while Malik and the others come rushing in to see what has unfolded. Desmond then awakens in the real world to find Alan Rickon alongside his 2 associates with Warren, revealing that Altair's memories has found a dozen pieces of Eden across the world. With Desmond's part being played, Alan commands that Desmond be killed before Lucy interjects saying that Abstergo might need him for other traps awaiting within the locations where the pieces of Eden reside. Alan agrees to her proposal, which allows Desmond, however slightly, to live a little bit longer. As Warren and Lucy leave the room, Desmond finds out that he's either starting to trip out, or he's somehow gained Altair's eagle vision. Wait, Desmond's seeing bloodied symbols on the ground, things that don't make sense. That sounds awfully familiar. Probably nothing. When returning to his room, Desmond activates his eagle vision to find blood-painted symbols all across his walls and just wonders who the hell was kept there before him. And then, the game just ends, leaving us to wonder what the hell's gonna happen. To some inconclusive, but for me, it makes for a great cliffhanger. As I've stated before, this is by far my favourite story in the Assassin's Creed series for reasons that I'll go into. While to some the less cinematic presentation might throw them off and the philosophy might not exactly be for everyone, honestly, after coming back and playing this game a few times, I've actually come to consider this one of my top 5 video game stories of all time. The game showcases some great development in characters like Altair and Malik, an intriguing mystery in characters like Lucy Stillman and Al Mualim, but also has a great main character in Desmond who, while being completely in the dark about a lot of things, he takes it in stride, and it allows for some humour to seep in this pretty philosophy-heavy narrative. The conflict between the Templars and the Assassins are interesting in this game, with their beliefs on peace and how it should be obtained, and as well as both of the personal reason for each of Altair's targets, also make for some pretty decent food for thought on an individual level. And even despite the ending leaving on a note that has more questions than it does answers, there's a lot more intrigue to be built upon, such as Desmond's predecessor's messages left across his room, the pieces of Eden, and those who came before, as Warren mentioned earlier. And yes, I know I went way overboard in the story segment of this review, but this is a story that I really think goes unnoticed by most people because of how Assassin's Creed 1 is overshadowed by Assassin's Creed 2. And while I do enjoy Ezio's personal journey from Assassin's Creed 2 as a way to connect the player to the character by making the stakes personal to them, I feel that Altair does a better job given his character arc. And for everyone's complaints about Desmond's future storyline being boring, when actually taking the time to examine all the emails and messages, I found myself wanting to see more, and given what was described, I actually kinda wish that we could have seen an Assassin's Creed game set in modern times with Desmond as the protagonist. But as an overall story, the plot of Assassin's Creed hits all the right notes for me in both depth, and as compulsion for me to play the game. Onto the gameplay side of things, Altair's controls are based on 2 modes, high profile and low profile actions by pressing the R1 button. Low profile actions allow Altair to blend in with scholars, gently push past people, and perform just generally discreet actions. High profile actions are similar, although they allow Altair to sprint, attack people, and perform the game's parkour mechanics. The parkour mechanics, while realistically handled, I'll have to criticize as being pretty sluggish. Now granted, as a fat fuck who can only dream of doing the shit that Altair does on a daily basis, I do think that like Silent Hill, being realistically handled wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but for a video game, and especially one that's notable for its parkour system, it probably could have used a quicker pace, especially since 9 times out of 10 you're usually being chased by guards. On the other hand, it's usually only when climbing up to places, but aside from that, the parkour when leaping from building to building and across wooden beams, well, it's relatively fast-paced and quite fun when they're in the thick of a chase. In terms of Altair's arsenal, he comes equipped with a hidden blade, which, as its name implies, is intended for stealthy assassinations because anytime you use it in combat, it's usually met with your enemy intercepting the blade and then just pushing you away. Yeah, for those of you who just jumped in with Assassin's Creed 2, you can't fight with a hidden blade in this one. Now, despite combat with the hidden blade being slim to none, you can counter with the hidden blade, but it is very difficult to time, and more often than not, you'll probably end up taking more hits than you are kills, so I really wouldn't advise doing so unless of course you have Matrix-like reflexes. The sword is a weapon that the game tries to say is the best weapon for combat, as it's usually malleable in how much power you can put into your hits, but I find that using the sword can be kind of, well, clunky. Especially considering that most guards are faster than you and oftentimes will manage to surround Altair and then proceed to kick his ass. Which is why, in my personal opinion, I found that the best weapon in this game is the short blade. Not only is it faster, but what it lacks in power, it makes up for in efficiency, as not only can it do everything the sword can do, minus the power build-up, but in this mode, Altair can also fling knives to take out long-distance foes, which, you know, to me, is a great way of taking out your targets or just thinning out the herd of guards while escaping. And lastly, there's the good old fisticuffs, when Altair has to beat the shit out of some motherfucker who's running his mouth. Overall, the combat in Assassin's Creed, though deep in many aspects, can be a little bit clunky if you don't know what you're doing. But if you can master the combat system, including the use of counters, dodges and grabs, then the game turns from what was once a mediocre battle system into one that has many workarounds and small tricks which you can use to get yourself out of sticky situations. Though later games would heavily contradict the groundwork laid with the first Assassin's Creed game, combat in this game is something that's meant to be avoided, kinda like a stealth game in many ways. In fact, Altair's entire arrogance character arc, to me, was the developer's way of lambasting the player for making rash decisions in the heat of killing your targets, which I swear they had made Malik their mouthpiece in order to deliver it, considering his harsh criticisms of Altair. The key here is patience and timing, which if you have both of those things, then Assassin's Creed 1, well, you're pretty much set for it, really. That being said, there are only two things that really bug the fuck out of me in terms of gameplay here. One, how easily the guards are set off, and that all you have to do is pretty much just sneeze, and then you'll hear that all too familiar sound of
Infidels die!
And two, beggars, fucking drunks, and crazies. With the beggars, they'll usually jump in your way, begging for money, and especially in Acre with their annoying as fuck Cockney accents, and they start begging like a cash-strapped whore for money, and 9 times out of 10, you'll usually stab them instead of your target, and you wanna know what happens?
Infidels die!
But to me, the worst of them are the crazies and drunks. Not only are they just generally annoying, but the moment you do anything to antagonize them, the guards are all
Infidels die!
Oh, so when the drunks go around pushing people, it's okay, but the moment I fight back, oh no, the Templars don't like that. Honestly though, it's just a small nitpick, but it's one that'll really get on your nerves. One last gameplay element to talk about is the use of Altair's Eagle Vision, which is an ability granted to him from his genetic line, which allows him to discern the intent from people, with white being unimportant, blue being a colour for allies, red for enemies, and of course gold for Altair's targets. In terms of mission structure, your goals are often done in a linear fashion, albeit with an A, B, and occasionally C choice of which target in the 3 cities you want to assassinate first. However, you will still have to go to all 3 cities at some point, but which order you pick is up to you. While in the cities, Altair must first head to the Assassin's Bureau, where he must learn from the masters of where he should begin his search, and then he has to gather information by walking amongst the people of that city. Such missions include beating up heretics for information, eavesdropping on talkative citizens, pickpocketing people, and lastly, informers.
Informer, you know, say that I'm a stormy, I go blam. I like you boom boom down.
No, not that informer. But honestly, the informers are my one problem with the missions in Assassin's Creed 1. And I know a lot of people say that the missions in Assassin's Creed 1 are repetitive, and don't get me wrong, they are, and those criticisms are entirely fair. But the question is that a bad thing? For things like eavesdropping, pickpocketing, and interrogation missions, to me, those feel authentically assassin-like behaviour, and though it's structured and performed in the same way, the information you gather on your target can be of some serious help. And hell, out of the 6 missions in total you have to do, you're only required to do 3 of them in order to reach the requirement for the assassination mission to begin. But the informers, on the other hand, bug me for one reason. These so-called assassins are incompetent as fuck. The missions that they send Altair on feel a little bit too video gamey for my taste, and even though the more tolerable ones are just the guard assassination missions, I have to wonder why they can't do it themselves, since I can only assume that they were trained as similar to Altair. And then you have shit like collecting flags. What the fuck, man? Which is why I envision the Altair Informer missions going something kinda like this. Altair, can you please kill my targets for me? I'm tired. I can't be bothered. Can you do it? I mean, how fucking lazy are they? And all the information you really get in return is something as petty as this. Hey, Altair. I heard that Robert de Sable likes to look at women's underwear. Shh, don't tell. Well, see ya. And as for the fucking flag missions, Altair, Al-Mualim said that I have to make you run around the city and pick up flags. Why does Al-Mualim want me to collect flags? Well, I don't fucking know. Just do it now! But aside from that, the missions in this game, though repetitive, is a kind of repetition that makes sense in the context of the game, and as an assassin, with many of the methods of obtaining information, you know, it feels like something that an assassin would do. But that being said, I can still see where people come from when they're finding these missions a little bit too repetitive for their own good, which is fair criticism, but one that I can personally deal with. Over to the technical aspects, Assassin's Creed, graphically speaking, looks pretty good for an early PS3 and Xbox 360 game. Its visual style matches the balance between gritty visuals like the cities of Acre and Damas, but it looks absolutely beautiful with areas like the Kingdom and Masya. I'm serious, man. On my most recent playthrough of this game, I often just found myself taking a peaceful stroll across the kingdom, combined with the ambient soundtrack, and I just found myself getting lost in the atmosphere of this game. Speaking of music, the soundtrack by Jesper Kyd, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, is by far my favourite soundtrack in the entire series. I mean, this soundtrack is ambient, but it also features a very Middle Eastern vibe to its music, which really immerses the player into the cities such as Jerusalem and Damas. But where this soundtrack shines is in tracks like The Bureau, The Kingdom 2, and The Assassin's HQ, as the ambience of these tracks are like transcendent. It's the kind of music you can really meditate to and find spiritual peace with yourself. But even then, the iconic track of the game, which plays whenever city guards chase you, as, well, bluntly titled The Chase, it really gets your heart pumping and does well to emphasize that these guards are going to kill you and you basically need to run away like a bitch. One other thing to note is the writing of the game, which I know I practically covered everything in the story segment, but it bears repeating that the philosophy-heavy narrative really sets the tone of this game for me, and it's something that I feel a lot of later games in the series kind of lost. But even going past the game's story, the writing and interactions are also a point of praise, because I really loved how sarcastic Desmond could be, as well as Malik whenever Altair went off and did something arrogant or stupid. I mean, hell, I even liked this guy!
Altair, it seems my students do not fully understand what it is to wield a blade. Perhaps you could show them what you know.
In terms of voice acting, Assassin's Creed actually does pretty well in all departments, with Nolan North as Desmond giving a great performance, as does Christian Bell as Lucy Stillman, and the rest of the cast, whether Syrian, French or English, they all give believable performances. The reason why Altair had an American accent in the first game was because the voice directors thought that Philip Shabazz's voice just sounded awesome. And you know what? I completely agree. Though Assassin's Creed Revelations would regrettably fix this, Altair's voice for this game sounds really fucking cool, and honestly, jarring accent aside, it's smooth because of the rule of cool. And so with that said, what are my final thoughts on Assassin's Creed? Assassin's Creed 1, unlike a lot of first games in the series, was one where the foundation was laid out, but like most successful series, it's usually just the bare bones one, and the sequels oftentimes have improved and refined the formula and removed what didn't work. But Assassin's Creed 1, to me, especially after more recent playthroughs, they've made me rethink that a little bit. When I first played Assassin's Creed, I had no experience with the series, and I thought for a long time that Assassin's Creed 2 was a better game because it refined the gameplay mechanics compared to the first one. Going back to this game, it made me realize that there was a lot more to the first Assassin's Creed game than many give it credit for, and that's especially noticeable given the depth of its story compared to later games in the series. In terms of recommendations, if you like a philosophy-heavy narrative, an Assassin's Creed game that focuses more on being an actual assassin, an atmospheric atmosphere, a representation of Syria during the Crusades, or like everybody should, buy the game because of this guy.
Altair, it seems my students do not fully understand what it is to wield a blade. Perhaps you could show them what you know.
Then Assassin's Creed will most likely be a decent game, even despite some of its rough edges in the gameplay department. So with that said, I'm Skully, keep it new metal, and is it me or did things just get suddenly darker in here? Catch you on the flip side, and hopefully nothing more fucked up happens to me than what happened to me last time.